Well, there's been a lot of protests of late, and one of them happened right here in our CBD, and it was our public servants. Well, Tibor Mazaros went along to find out what it was all about.
Here we are in the city of Perth. Nice day, lunchtime. It's a nice break for everyone. Instead of having a break, the CPSU members are protesting. It's a stop work protest today for pay rise.
When do we want it? Now!
We are actually having a stop work meeting here for this building here, which is 140 William Street, for all the workers there who are negotiating their agreement for their paying conditions with the Barnett government. It's an agreement we call General Agreement 6, and it covers a very large number of workers in the public sector. The government's offer so far has been very poor. We've been negotiating with them since October of last year.
So how much is the very poor?
What it is 2.5%, and each year for 3 years, plus trade-offs around job security. We started off with a figure that was similar to what nurses and prison officers got last year. So that was around 4% in each year. We've already compromised. We've said to government that we're willing to accept 3.5 in each year and no trade-offs, but government aren't meeting us anywhere in the middle. They've provided one offer and they won't continue to negotiate.
We feel that it's only fair. What we're asking is not unreasonable. I don't think anybody wants to go backwards. The cost of living is a two-tier cost of living in WA, and our tier is battling to just keep our head above water.
CPI for the December quarter, which was the most recently published figures, was 2.9%. So 2.5 is actually below that CPI figure. The trade-off they're asking for is around job security. What it means is that government can get private industry to come in and do the work of the people who are in that building. And that can, what we find often is that ends up being a more expensive arrangement than hiring people directly, and it means you don't get a continuity of work and of workers, so the work quality can be poorer. And we think that's a very large concern, and also it threatens the job security of our members. That is all part of their package, so they expect our members to accept less than CPI plus trade-offs of their conditions of employment and their job security.
We've been having cutbacks to our staff and our resources, but we're still supposed to put in the same amount of service without any really increased pay. The issue is more for the people on the lower levels of salary.
I don't know about you guys, but when I bring my salary check, it sure as hell isn't going very far.
It puts a lot of stress. It puts stress on people. It puts stress on families. I'm a working mum. But what about people who've got young children who are forced to work just to meet the mortgage? And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
The government is putting up the cost of living continually, utility price increases, license fees, etc., which will be in the next budget too. And so they're adding to the problem while saying, oh, this is what you got to live with.
The Barnett government right now is not offering workers in the public sector a fair deal. It's not offering them the cost of living. It's not offering them CPI. So what we've got here is a government that is cutting back the public sector, cutting back services our community needs while the community itself is growing. It's privatising services so that big companies can run them for private profit. And it's not even offering the workers who deliver those services a fair deal to keep up with the cost of living.
The government here has to realize that if they want a fair level of service, both for themselves as the government, but also for the community, that then they have to pay for what they get. And they've blown money on many other areas. Well, they need to save some for us too. And there's not just us that are demonstrating for a fair deal. There's teachers that were out last week, there's the police coming up, there's other unions. And so we'll all just say to them, listen, be fair, be square, or to heck with you. This is the start of the campaign. We're gathering support, we're showing the government our displeasure, but also we can do more than this. We can have other rallies, we can have work to rule, we can have other work stoppages.
We are having a meeting with government's representatives on Thursday at the Department of Commerce. We are hopeful that they will come up with a better offer. If the government doesn't come to the table with something better, then we're going to have to take even more serious action.
Tibor reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, it seems that some former members of our Australian Army are unhappy with the treatment they've been given after they were injured. Nora O'Malley has more details.
With Anzac Day on the horizon, the welfare of our soldiers, veterans, and their families is top of mind. In 2011, the government reviewed its military compensation arrangements and committed $17.4 million over 4 years to implement a new package.
I often hear bureaucrats, government ministers say that the defence and veterans compensation and care in Australia is the best in the world. It may be, it's very good, but too many people still fall through the cracks. And if it's the best in the world, it ought to be too, because the service that those young men and women of Australia who've given has too been the best in the world. For a small country, we've lost over 102,000 young men and women who fought and died in foreign wars. For those who've come home, often the agonies, the pains, the mental anguish lives on and on and on. And we should look after them. So some of the improvements that came as part of that package, as I understand it, for instance, were it enabled people to get good financial advice, and if they needed it, it enabled them to get legal advice to sort of help them make their way through the various acts. One of the other things it did was, for instance, under previous circumstances, if you suffered a previous wound that was covered under one act and you were then wounded again, it might be that because the second time you were wounded you're under a separate act, you might have found out that you couldn't get compensation for that second wound. So that helps to clarify all of those things. Governments, Department of Defence, Department of Veterans Affairs is doing more now to work together more closely and more collaboratively to try to ensure, one, that returning members of the Australian Defence Force are aware of the issues of mental health, and that they take steps to address them. So I think as a nation we are now much more aware of the hidden wounds of war. For instance, in my circumstances, I came home minus my legs. People could see me, they could say, okay, there's the loss, we see it, we recognise it. For a lot of people with mental health issues, those wounds are hidden. They often don't manifest themselves for a long time, and that's why it's called post-traumatic stress disorder, because in many cases the mental health issue doesn't come to the surface for years and years and years. And if you fight to get your post-traumatic stress disorder condition accepted, you will get compensation, and that's important. It's not just about compensation, it's also about treatment, because we want young men and women who've returned from a theatre of war, we want them to live full, healthy, active and productive, and above all, happy lives.
Now, I was chatting with a lady this morning, and she did mention that the Vietnam vets weren't as recognized as World War II, World War I even. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, the Vietnam War was a socially unpopular war in many respects. It was a war that divided our nation, not just Australia, but the United States. It was a war that was complicated by the very unfair process of conscription, where young men just had their birth dates pulled out of a barrel, a bit like winning a lottery of death, many people said. If your birth date was pulled out, you went into the army, you had no choice whether you went or didn't. It was a very divisive war. Many people felt that we shouldn't be there. When the war was over, no one really recognised or acknowledged the incredible professionalism, the bravery and the sacrifice of those Australians who served in Vietnam. And indeed, it wasn't until many years after the war that a welcome home parade was held. I think Australia has now recognised those young men who went away and served in the Vietnam War, and I encourage all Vietnam veterans to come forward now to be a part of the process and the recognition and the acknowledgement of Anzac Day. And I'm sure too that most Vietnam veterans, because Vietnam veterans know what happened to them, because they know how much it hurt them and their families, I'm sure that they will encourage all young Australians who served post then to come out and receive their due acknowledgement and recognition.
You can show your support for our veterans and troops on Anzac Day, which is April the 25th. The Returned and Services League will be hosting a dawn service here at Kings Park. This is Nora O'Malley for Undercurrent.
Well, driving through Fremantle a lot, I've noticed there are a lot of skateboarders, especially near one of those old wool stores. Well, perhaps their luck is about to change because this Sunday, the 13th of April, a brand new skate park is opening in Freo, and Tibor Mazzaros has all the details.
Skating away, hey, skating away, hey, skating away, hey, on the thin ice of a new day.
Here we are at the top of Fremantle in the Ferryville, and we're here to tell you a fairy tale about the skate park of Fremantle. What's your hopes?
Well, let's hope a lot of people come to visit the skate park and come and have a ride on the wheel as well. The wheel is open every day from 12 till 9, with exception of Tuesdays, then we're closed. It's $12 for an adult, $10 for a kid, but we do several discounts. So, for instance, if 2 people come, it's only $10 per person. When the day the skate park opens, next Sunday, the tickets will be all $8.
So what do you think, why people oppose to this skate park?
There are a number of reasons. Some people just inherently don't like skaters because they perceive them to be noisy or over boisterous or even criminal. So people have perceptions about other people, but people have their views and they're locked in on some of those. But our job isn't to be prejudiced about it. Our job is to try and say this is a public regional reserve and everybody has a right to this space, and we're trying to develop it in that light.
It was controversial, and but what I hope is now that many of those who opposed it actually get to see it, and their fears about how it was going to look haven't been realised, and that they can see it actually is a good fit with the rest of the park. It really feels like Freo. It's got some fantastic, great Freo elements like the old container and the buoy, and it just feels like it can be a really great community space. There's a range of different areas, from the hardcore skate bowl behind me with the buoy in the middle to the more street skating elements that we're standing in now, to table tennis areas, parkour, and dismantle with the bike repair area. It's going to be a really great, diverse youth plaza.
Yeah, look, the overall vision was $1.6 million. So far it's cost $1.2 million. The city funded a very large part of that. Lotteries West also came to the tune of, I can't remember the exact figure, I think it's $400,000. But it's a huge commitment from the city, a very deliberate commitment to a sector of our community that hasn't always been given a lot. That's the younger people. And so hopefully this is something that they will cherish and say, look, the city actually cares about our needs as well.
Are we going to have some great street art in here?
Certainly, and one of the things we'll be doing is, like with the table tennis tables and other things, is decorating those and running street art programs. But also we want to make sure that it keeps that really great aesthetic that it's got as well, and we kind of keep that Freo feel. The stage 2, we'll be putting in some basketball facilities and some barbecues and park benches and those kinds of things, and that'll happen over the rest of this calendar year.
What's for the future for Fremantle in the next 2 years?
Well, look, we're still very focused on our strategic plan, which is about getting more people living and working and recreating in the city. We've seen a lot of hotel developments approved and already about to be built, and we've also seen a lot of apartments approved and ready for construction. The high-rise is used as a bit of a hysteria kind of campaign to try and boost the view that Fremantle's going down the City of Perth model of 30-storey buildings. Well, we're certainly not doing that. 5 stories is around about the right height for a streetscape. All the great cities in Europe have around about that, if not a little bit more.
So what is the replacement for Myer stores?
Fremantle doesn't have a Myer, but that's not certainly the end of the world. What it has is creativity, it has the arts, it has a really vibrant entertainment environment, and a lot of retail is now connected to entertainment as well. So it's a specialist retail centre that where people can actually come and buy things which they won't be able to find in some of those other centres. So we'll market ourselves and position ourselves as a creative city, and we'll be fine.
Well over 1 million people a year come to Fremantle, and it is still such a popular place, especially on the weekends. And our job as a council is to make it more than just a tourist place, but a place that works 7 days a week and a great place for people to live and work as well.
I sincerely hope that the new skate park in Fremantle will bring more tourists into the town and give pleasure for all the young ones and the older ones to enjoy it. Tibor for Undercurrent.
Well, that brings us to the end not only of another episode of Undercurrent, but to the end of a wonderfully sunny week here in Perth. Hopefully there's another one just around the corner. My name is Christy Molliker. Catch you again next week for more Undercurrent.